My name is Sarah, and I'm 34 years old. For 10 years, I believed I was living the dream, a stable marriage, a loving husband, and a comfortable home. My husband, Daniel, was everything I had ever wanted in a partner, charming, ambitious, and attentive, or so I thought. Little did I know, my seemingly perfect world was about to crumble beneath my feet. It all started a few months ago. Daniel had begun working late more often than usual. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was an architect after all, and his projects often demanded long hours. But as the late nights became more frequent, something about his demeanor began to change. He seemed distant, distracted, and uncharacteristically guarded with his phone. I didn't want to be that suspicious wife who overanalyzes everything, but the little things began to add up. His cologne lingered stronger when he came home late, as if he'd reapplied it. A new credit card statement appeared in the mail, one I didn't recognize. He'd laugh at his phone screen but lock it the moment I walked into the room. Still, I tried to convince myself I was overthinking. I told myself, he's just stressed from work, or maybe he's planning a surprise for me. But deep down, a knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach every time I kissed him goodnight. One evening, I decided to talk to my best friend Emma about it. Emma had known me since college, and she had a way of cutting through my insecurities. "Sarah," she said, sipping her coffee, "you're not crazy for feeling like something's off. Men don't just change their routines like this without a reason." "What do I do, though?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to accuse him of something he might not be doing. Emma leaned in, her tone serious. "Don't accuse him, just watch. If he's hiding something, he'll slip up eventually." I wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea of playing detective in my own marriage, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. I decided to keep a close eye on Daniel's behavior. The first thing I noticed was how protective he was of his phone. One night, he fell asleep on the couch and I saw his phone light up with a notification. My heart pounded as I reached for it, but just as I was about to pick it up, he stirred and shifted in his sleep. I froze, pretending to adjust the blanket over him. The next day, I couldn't get the thought out of my head. What was he hiding? Was it a work-related secret? Or was it something more sinister? Then came the night that changed everything. Daniel had texted me earlier in the day to let me know he'd be working late again. His tone in the text seemed normal, but something didn't sit right with me. Emma's voice echoed in my mind. If he's hiding something, he'll slip up. I decided to follow him. After he left for work, I gave it an hour before I grabbed my coat and car keys. I told myself I wasn't crazy, I just needed to know. As I drove toward his office, I practiced what I'd say if he caught me. "Oh, I was just in the area and thought we could grab a late coffee," I rehearsed, even though I knew it sounded flimsy. When I reached his office, his car wasn't in the parking lot. My pulse quickened. Maybe he'd taken a client out, I thought. But just as I was about to drive away, I spotted something, his car, parked outside a dimly lit restaurant a few blocks away. I parked my car discreetly and sat there, staring at the restaurant's glowing sign. What was he doing here? My stomach churned as I imagined all the possibilities. After about 15 minutes, the door to the restaurant opened, and there he was, Daniel, laughing and holding hands with a woman I didn't recognize. She was tall, with jet black hair and a figure that looked like it belonged on the cover of a magazine. They looked intimate. My heart shattered. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the walls of my car were closing in around me. I watched as they walked to his car, laughing and talking like they didn't have a care in the world. He opened the door for her, something he hadn't done for me in years. I clenched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wanted to storm out of the car, confront him right then and there, but a voice in my head told me to wait. I needed more than this. I needed proof. As they drove away, I followed them, keeping a safe distance. I didn't know where they were going, but I was determined to find out, and that's how it all began, the unraveling of my life, one devastating discovery at a time. I followed Daniel's car with my heart pounding in my chest, my thoughts racing. Where were they going, and who was this woman? My mind conjured up 1,000 scenarios, each worse than the last. Was she his colleague, a client? Or was she something more, something that could shatter the 10 years we'd built together? I kept a safe distance, careful not to draw attention. They drove to the outskirts of town where the streets were quieter, lined with rows of cozy houses and boutique shops. When they finally stopped, it wasn't at a hotel, as I'd feared, but a small, upscale townhouse. My stomach dropped. I parked my car at the end of the street, far enough to avoid suspicion, but close enough to watch. Daniel and the woman got out of the car, laughing softly. She reached for his hand, and he didn't hesitate to take it. They walked up to the townhouse, where she pulled out a key and unlocked the door. I sat in my car, frozen. This was worse than I had imagined. This wasn't some fling or a spur-of-the-moment mistake. He had a key to her place. They had a routine. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone and dialed Emma. "Sarah?" she answered, her voice groggy. I'd forgotten it was nearly midnight. "Emma," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "I followed him. He's at another woman's house." There was silence on the other end before Emma said, "Are you sure? Maybe it's not what it looks like." "It is," I said, swallowing hard. They were holding hands. She let him into her house with a key. "This isn't just a one-time thing. This is something else." Emma sighed deeply. "Okay, listen to me. You need to stay calm. Don't confront him yet. If you want the upper hand, you need more than just your word against his. You need proof." Proof. The word echoed in my mind as I hung up the phone. Emma was right. If I confronted Daniel now, he'd find a way to twist the story, to deny everything, and make me feel like I was crazy. I needed to be smart. I spent the next few days pretending everything was normal. I smiled, cooked dinner, and even asked Daniel about his day. He played his part perfectly, talking about meetings and deadlines like nothing was wrong, but every time he smiled at me, I felt like a knife was twisting in my heart. At night, while he slept, I started my investigation. I checked his social media accounts, his emails, and his bank statements. It wasn't easy. Daniel was meticulous about keeping his private life hidden, but he wasn't perfect. The first clue came in the form of a text message. His phone buzzed while he was in the shower, and I couldn't resist the urge to peek. The message was from a contact named Mark, but the content told a different story. "Can't stop thinking about last night. Same time tomorrow." I snapped a photo of the message before locking his phone and placing it back on the counter. My blood boiled as I imagined him laughing with this woman, sharing moments that should have been ours. The second clue came when I checked his credit card statement. There were charges at restaurants I'd never been to, jewelry stores I hadn't visited, and even a spa. None of these things were for me. Finally, I decided to take things a step further. I hired a private investigator. It felt extreme, but I needed concrete evidence. I couldn't live in this limbo, second-guessing every interaction. The investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Linda, got to work immediately. Within days, she sent me photos of Daniel and the woman together, shopping, having dinner, and even kissing in a park. Each image was a dagger to my heart, but they also gave me clarity. This was real. This was happening, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. One evening, as I sat in bed scrolling through the photos Linda had sent me, Daniel walked in whistling a tune. He kissed me on the forehead and asked, "How was your day, babe?" I forced a smile, my stomach churning. "Good," I said, my voice steady. "How about you? Long day at work?" He nodded, pulling off his tie. "Exhausting, but it's all worth it." All worth it? The irony wasn't lost on me. I waited until he fell asleep before I called Emma again. "I have the proof," I told her. "Now what?" she asked, her tone cautious. "Now," I said, my voice firm, "I make a plan. I didn't know exactly how I was going to confront Daniel or what the fallout would be, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story." The next few days were some of the hardest of my life. Pretending that everything was fine while I carried the weight of Daniel's betrayal was like living in a nightmare. Every time he smiled at me, kissed me goodbye, or said, "I love you," I had to fight the urge to scream at him, but I knew I couldn't confront him without a solid plan. I wanted him to feel the full force of what he'd done. He needed to understand that his lies, his deceit, and his utter disregard for our marriage wouldn't go unpunished. I spent hours brainstorming with Emma. "You could just kick him out," she suggested during one of our calls. "That's too easy," I replied, shaking my head even though she couldn't see me. "He doesn't get to walk away without consequences. I want him to feel the betrayal I feel." Emma sighed. "Then you'll need to hit him where it hurts, his pride, his image, and maybe his wallet." Her words stuck with me. Daniel prided himself on being a respectable, successful man. To the outside world, he was the perfect husband, the guy who had it all together. If I wanted to make an impact, I needed to shatter that illusion. The first step in my plan was to gather everything, every bit of evidence Linda had provided, the suspicious text messages, the financial statements, and even the photos of him with the other woman. I printed it all out and placed it neatly in a folder labeled Lies. The second step was a little more devious. I reached out to our closest friends and family members, inviting them to dinner at our house. "It's a surprise for Daniel," I told them, feigning excitement. "He's been working so hard, and I want to show him how much he's appreciated."
The date was set for Saturday night. I spent the rest of the week pretending everything was fine, even going so far as to help Daniel pick out a new suit for an upcoming client meeting.
When Saturday arrived, I could barely contain my nerves. I spent the morning cooking and setting up the dining room, all while Daniel lounged on the couch, oblivious to what was coming. By the time our guests began arriving, I had perfected my performance. I greeted everyone with a warm smile, thanked them for coming, and even made a toast to the wonderful man of the hour. Daniel looked genuinely touched, which made what I was about to do all the more satisfying. Once dinner was served, I stood at the head of the table, raising my glass. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady. "This evening is about celebrating the man I married, the man who's been my partner for 10 years.
Daniel smiled, his cheeks slightly flushed from the wine. "But tonight," I continued, my tone shifting, "I also want to share something I've recently discovered. Something I think everyone here deserves to know."
A murmur rippled through the room as I reached for the folder I'd placed on the sideboard. My heart pounded as I opened it, pulling out the first photo of Daniel and the other woman. "This," I said, holding it up for everyone to see, "is Daniel with his girlfriend, the woman he's been seeing behind my back while pretending to be the loving husband you all know."
The room erupted into gasps and whispers. Daniel's face turned ghostly pale, his fork clattering onto his plate. "Sarah, what are you doing?" he stammered, his voice shaking. I ignored him, pulling out more photos and passing them around the table. "These were taken by a private investigator I hired after months of suspicion, and these," I said, holding up a stack of receipts, "are the charges he's made to restaurants, jewelry stores, and spas, all for her." "Sarah, stop!" Daniel shouted, rising from his seat. "Why?" I shot back, my voice rising. "So you can keep lying to everyone? To me?" The room fell silent, all eyes on us. I could feel the weight of their judgment bearing down on him, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of power.
"You want to explain yourself, Daniel?" I asked, crossing my arms. I can't believe you'd do this here," he stammered. "This is private, Sarah."
"Private?" I laughed bitterly. "You made it public the moment you chose to humiliate me, and now everyone here knows who you really are, a liar and a cheat." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't say another word.
The silence in the room was deafening, and I could see the pity in our friends' eyes. Some looked at me with sympathy, others glared at Daniel with thinly veiled disgust. "Get out," I finally said, my voice cold and steady. "Pack your things and leave. You don't live here anymore." He hesitated, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an ally, but no one came to his defense. One by one, our friends and family members began to leave, each offering me a hug or a whispered word of support on their way out. When the last guest was gone, Daniel finally spoke. You didn't have to do this, Sarah," he said, his voice low. "Yes, I did," I replied, meeting his gaze. "You broke my heart, Daniel. Now you get to live with the consequences." He left that night, and as the door slammed behind him, I felt a strange mix of pain and relief. My marriage was over, but so was the charade. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The silence that followed Daniel's departure was deafening. I sat on the couch, staring at the door he'd slammed shut, unsure whether to cry, scream, or collapse in exhaustion. The whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, anger, and heartbreak left me feeling hollow. Emma came over the next morning with 2 cups of coffee and a box of pastries. She didn't say much at first, she just sat beside me, letting me soak in the reality of what had happened. "Do you feel any better?" she finally asked, her voice gentle. I shook my head. "Not really. I mean, I'm glad I confronted him, but I can't stop thinking about everything. Was it my fault? Did I miss the signs earlier?" Emma placed a reassuring hand on mine. "Sarah, this isn't your fault. You trusted him, and he took advantage of that trust. That's on him, not you." Her words offered a sliver of comfort, but the days that followed were still some of the hardest I'd ever endured. Everywhere I turned, I saw reminders of the life we'd built together, the wedding photos on the mantle, the mug he always used, the smell of his cologne lingering on our bed sheets. It was like grieving a death, except the person I was mourning was still alive. But despite the pain, I was determined not to let it consume me. I threw myself into cleaning the house, removing every trace of Daniel from my life. His clothes went into garbage bags, his toiletries into a box by the door. The wedding photos came down, replaced by pictures of my friends, my family, and me. It wasn't easy, but each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some old paperwork, I stumbled across a small notebook tucked into Daniel's desk drawer. My curiosity got the better of me, and I flipped it open only to find something that made my blood run cold. It was a journal, Daniel's journal. In it, he'd written about his affair in shocking detail. March 15th, saw her again today. God, she's so different from Sarah. Fun, carefree, exciting. Being with her feels like I can breathe again. April 22nd. Sarah's starting to ask questions. I hate lying to her, but what else can I do? She'd never understand. May 3rd. Took her to the lake house today. Sarah doesn't even know I still have the keys.
I slammed the journal shut, my hands trembling. He'd taken her to our lake house, the one we'd bought together, the one where we'd spent countless weekends building our dream getaway. The betrayal felt fresh all over again, but this time it fueled a fire inside me. He hadn't just hurt me, he desecrated the life we'd built together.
I called Linda, the private investigator, and asked her to meet me at the lake house. I need to know everything, I told her. What he's been doing, who he's been with, and how often he's been there. She agreed, and 2 days later, we drove to the lake house together. As we pulled up the gravel driveway, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. The house looked exactly as I remembered it, cozy, inviting, and full of memories. But as I stepped inside, those memories were overshadowed by the knowledge of what had taken place here. Linda got to work immediately, combing through the house for any clues Daniel might have left behind. It didn't take long for her to find them. In the bedroom, she discovered a bottle of perfume that wasn't mine. In the kitchen, she found wine glasses in the sink, lipstick stains still visible on the rim of one. The final blow came when she checked the guest bedroom and found a small gold bracelet on the nightstand. Engraved on the inside were the initials EB. "Does that mean anything to you?" Linda asked, holding up the bracelet. I shook my head, my stomach churning. "No, but I'm going to find out." The next morning, I called Daniel's office, pretending to be a client interested in one of his projects. When the receptionist asked for my name, I said, "Emily Baker." "Ah, Miss Baker," the receptionist said, her tone bright. "Daniel speaks very highly of you. How can I help?" I nearly dropped the phone. Emily Baker, AEB. "I was hoping to get his email address," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady.
She gave it to me without hesitation, and as soon as I hung up, I started typing. Subject, you've been caught.
Body, I know everything, the affair, the lake house, the lies. If you think you're going to get away with this, you're sorely mistaken. You'll regret the day you met my husband. I hit send, my heart racing. It didn't take long for her to reply. Her email was short and defensive. "I don't know what you're talking about. Leave me alone."
But her words only confirmed what I already knew. Emily Baker was the woman who had destroyed my marriage. Now I had 2 targets, and I wasn't finished yet.
The discovery of Emily Baker's identity gave me a renewed sense of purpose.
I wasn't going to let her or Daniel walk away unscathed. They had dismantled my life piece by piece, and now it was my turn to do the same to theirs. I spent the next week meticulously planning my next steps. Emma was my sounding board, offering ideas and helping me refine my strategy. "If you want to make an impact," she said, "you have to go for both of them, publicly. They should feel as exposed as you do."
It was bold, but it was exactly what I needed. The first step was to gather everything I had on Emily Baker. A quick dive into her social media accounts revealed that she was a rising star in the real estate industry. Her Instagram was filled with glamorous photos, posing in luxury homes, attending high-profile events, and networking with powerful people. She prided herself on her reputation, and I knew that was where I could hit her the hardest. I created an anonymous Instagram account and began posting the evidence I had gathered. Photos of her with Daniel, screenshots of their texts, and even the bracelet Linda had found in the lake house. Each post was accompanied by a scathing caption: "Behind every successful woman is someone willing to destroy another woman's life." Luxury homes by day, stealing husbands by night. Meet Emily Baker, the real homewrecker.
The posts gained traction quickly. Comments flooded in, some from strangers condemning her actions, others from people in her professional circle expressing shock. I watched as her carefully curated image began to crumble, but I wasn't done yet. The second step was Daniel. I'd already exposed him to our friends and family, but I wanted to ensure that his professional life felt the weight of his actions too. I knew how much his reputation meant to him. It was the cornerstone of his career. Using the same anonymous account, I sent an email to his firm's HR department attaching the photos and receipts that proved his misconduct. I also included a detailed account of how he had used company time and resources to carry out his affair, complete with timestamps and locations. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. One morning, Daniel stormed into the house, his face red with anger. "What the hell have you done, Sarah?" he shouted, slamming the door behind him. I stood calmly in the living room, arms crossed. "I exposed you," I said simply, "the way you exposed me to humiliation and betrayal." "My job is on the line," he yelled, his voice cracking. "And Emily, her career is ruined." "Good," I replied coldly. "Now you both know what it feels like to lose everything." He looked at me like he didn't recognize the person standing in front of him. "You've gone too far," he said, his voice trembling. "No, Daniel," I said, my tone unwavering. "You went too far the moment you decided I wasn't enough for you. This is just the result of your choices." He didn't have a response to that. Instead, he grabbed a suitcase and began packing his things. "You're gonna regret this," he muttered as he shoved clothes into the bag. "No, Daniel," I said, watching him with a mix of anger and relief. "The only regret I have is trusting you." When he left, it felt like the final chapter of our life together had closed. But the aftermath of my actions continued to unfold. Emily Baker's employer announced that they were parting ways with her, citing a violation of company ethics. Daniel's firm suspended him pending an internal investigation. The whispers of scandal spread quickly, and soon both of them were the talk of their respective industries. As for me, I began to rebuild. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable. But with Emma's support and the knowledge that I had taken back control of my life, I started to move forward. I began therapy to work through the pain and rediscover who I was outside of my marriage. I picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends, and even started volunteering at a local animal shelter, a passion I'd neglected during my years with Daniel. One day, as I was organizing adoption paperwork, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Daniel. "I'm sorry," the text read, "for everything." I stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. Some chapters don't deserve a sequel. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I had learned something invaluable. Sometimes the best revenge is simply reclaiming your own happiness.